Welcome to Conversations with the Planets with Lori Kaufman and Alicia Cielle Heiser, a podcast that roots the wisdom of the stars into our lived experiences here on Earth and weaves the power of diverse healing modalities together with astrology.
I'm Lori Kaufman, an astrologer, tarot reader, writer, and teacher. I co-lead the Asteroid Special Interest Research Group for NCGR, an astrology organization, and I offer all different sorts of readings, online and in person.
I'm Alicia Cielle Heiser, an astrologer, herbalist, and witch living in Oregon on Kalapuya land, and I offer astrology consultations and teachings aimed at helping you honor your most authentic self and trust your intuition. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Conversations with the Planets. And today we're going to be talking about having malefic-ruled luminaries and angles. And we're super excited to have our friend Matthew Oliver, founder of Still Water Alchemy, on. Hello, Matthew.
Hey, thanks for having me, girls. I'm super pumped to talk about malefics.
Woo! As like Venus
Yay.
just ingressed into Taurus, and Matthew has like the most like Venusian background to like balance
I
out
know.
the malefic.
It's perfect.
And we met Matthew last year. We all went to a retreat with Demetra George talking about Time Lords and digging deep into some really nerdy Hellenistic theory. And we're not going to go into like circumambulations today, but we're all steeped in the traditional literature. So it should be really fun to talk about the malefics.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess maybe we can all just go around and share what malefic luminaries and angles we have, and then just we'll kind of go from there. So I'm a night chart, but my sun is in Scorpio, ruled by Mars. And then my moon is in Pisces, and the closest, it's into Jupiter's bounds, and the closest aspect it makes is to a square with Jupiter and Sag, so it has a lot of Jupiter protection. But my moon is also in a 5-degree applying orb to Saturn, and they're both in the sixth. So and it's squaring Mars and Sag as well. So there's definitely malefic influence on my moon. And then my descendant is Aries, ruled by Mars, and my IC is my fifth house, Aquarius, ruled by Saturn. And Lori and I have also noticed this really cute trend between Libra and Cancer risings, where our fifth and seventh houses are both ruled by malefics, and our dating experiences tend to be kind of malefic. So we might get into that a bit.
Yay.
Woo! But yeah, Matthew, what are your malefic credentials?
I'm very, very malefic. And it's wild because we all met basically. I met Lori once before at an asteroid
Mhm.
retreat with Demetra, but we all like met
Mhm.
at that time little retreat a year ago today, basically. It was like
Aw.
June of 2024. So that's like a cute little
That is
Gemini thing.
cute.
But my malefics, so I am a day chart. I have Sun in Scorpio, Moon in Aries, and then Mars in Scorpio combusts the Sun, but in its own chariot in the 11th house. And then I'm a Capricorn rising with my Saturn in Aquarius. And my MC is also in Scorpio. And my IC is in Taurus in the fifth, but it opposes Mars in the 11th. So there's a lot of malefic goodness. So I'm really excited to talk about all this to like debunk the word malefic and how we can actually use it to our benefit, especially for those of us that are steeped in the protectiveness and the ferocity
hmm
of malefic energy.
I love
Yeah.
that. And like the nuances of having a very strong Mars in a day chart.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. What about you,
absolutely.
Lori? What's your
Yeah.
malefic
I have the
credentials?
opposite. I have the very weak Mars in a day chart.
And a very strong Saturn.
Yes, that too. Yes, I have an Aquarius stellium. Um, Lots of Aquarius energy, Aquarius sun, and Aries moon, and then I have Mars on my ascendant and a Capricorn descendant. So a lot of angles and my moon is conjunct my MC, even though it is in Pisces. So there is so much malefic energy in all of it, all of the chart.
Yeah. And, as Matthew already touched on, like malefics, there's so much like productive, useful energy that can come from working
Yes.
with them. And they can, I generally they're not super comfortable unless you're like a type 2, or like I have a lot of Scorpio placements and I love tattoos. Like some, sometimes suffering and pain can actually be quite nice. But like working with the
Sure.
malefics isn't like a feel good, snuggly Venus Jupiter situation, but
Hmm.
it can lead to great protection, great success. I feel like as a queer person, as a woman, being able to be malefic and like protect like things that are like marginalized and threatened, like we need to have the teeth of Mars and Saturn in this world
Hmm.
in particular. Yeah, what do you guys think about the benefits of having a strong malefic influence in your life?
Yeah, I have Mars in Cancer retrograde on my ascendant. And I like to think about how there are a lot of negatives and difficulties that can come from having a poorly placed Mars in a day chart. It being on the ascendant or in the first house definitely makes it a little bit better. It gives it some extra juice. But I like to think of it as like being protective over my home, over my family, over the things that I care about. Because it definitely shows up in ways like that. I also have noticed a pretty strong trend, in the circus world, at least, of a lot of my circus friends also have poorly placed Mars placements. Um, I do see Cancer Mars a lot, but I also see Libra. I see Libra Marses a lot in acro. And sometimes Taurus, because I think there's something like unconventional about the way that we choose to work out or move our body, something that people are going to judge or think is weird, even though it's aesthetic. It feels very like unhappy, malefic. Um, so I definitely think there's a lot of, I wouldn't see that as a negative, but it is something that's culturally weird or culturally different or
Hmm.
seen as, and that can be a huge way that planets show up in your chart as well.
Totally.
The one thing for me is the raw power and
Mm.
tenacity and resilience that comes with malefic energy. Lori and I have had conversations before of how certain people, they have so much Venusian and Jupiterian energy, like one small inconvenience
Yeah.
totally derails them. They like stop functioning as a human. I'm like, that is stressful, but this is, I call them princess problems. And princesses do have problems. Like I worked with someone like, I actually have a princess as a client, and they do have real problems. I'm like, I'm not saying they don't. But I'm saying that when you are working to support your entire family, working 3 jobs, going to the gym, learning a second language, trying to survive in a different country to make your whole entire family's life better, and someone doesn't get a text back from their partner that they really like, it's like, okay, like the person that has a lot of malefic energy can probably hold a lot more without breaking and succumbing. It's kind of like the saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So your
Yeah.
ability to die and be reborn and to exert strong boundaries so people do not fuck with you, essentially, is very
Mhm.
obvious when people have strong Mars or Saturn, no matter what dignity is, versus people that rely on Venus and Jupiter for a big part of their life and they get their first Saturn return. It's like, oh, this is now your turn
Hmm.
to experience what we've all lived with since birth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
I had a client like that once who her entire chart was Venus or Jupiter ruled, and she had nothing in the dark houses and just like craziest chart I've ever seen. And then during her Saturn return, she just crumbled. And it was so interesting. Saturn was in Sagittarius. And so it was like so interesting to watch that happen and just be like, have you ever been through anything bad? And she was like, no. Like, what's that like?
well, and I feel like because I'm on the tail end of my first Saturn return in Pisces and having a Jupiter
Yeah,
ruled Saturn. Matthew, you have Saturn in its own sign, right? Is
Lori
it
and I both have Saturn and
in
Aquarius.
Aquarius.
okay?
Hmm.
Yeah. And it's like I feel like Jupiter ruled Saturn's like Sag and Pisces are just
Hmm.
so abundantly hopeful and optimistic,
Yeah.
and they can see the best case scenario and the best side of things. And as someone with like four of my personal planets in Sag and Pisces and my sect light in Pisces, like there is a lot of really good that can come from like believing like this current world we're in, like there's like other ways the world could be that would be very affirming to life and very nourishing for all of us. And like that is possible. That's not what we have right now, but like the Jupiter gives you that
Mhm.
belief, and we need that to like just like sheer go out and make it happen. I also have both
Mhm.
my malefics in Jupiter signs though, so that I feel like that's part of the like going out and fighting to make it happen. But then yeah, like
Mhm.
Jupiter old Saturn's, it's like you can get into that idealism, and then you get to like the Saturn energy where it's like, but not everything is possible. And you have like these
Yeah.
much larger structures than you to contend with. And sometimes it just does really fucking suck. And I
Mm.
feel like it's like you can even have more extreme disappointment then when you're coming from the benefic highs and Saturn brings you down. Whereas people who have Saturn in their own sign, like, not that that's comfy, but they might just be a little easier, like, able to see, oh, if, like, Lori, you always talk about your Saturn return of seeing, like, if you'd
Yeah.
continued doing acro the way you were doing as you
Mhm.
were no longer like 22, you might have seriously injured yourself. So then you stopped doing the like free form acro and you didn't seriously injure yourself. Like that can be a strong
Mhm.
Saturn. Whereas like a Jupiter ruled Saturn might be like, oh, but I love the flying and
Yeah.
it's going to be okay. And then you tear your ACL while you're skiing and it's
Yeah.
not okay. Not like I did that or anything,
Yeah. That's
um,
unfamiliar.
but yeah, it's like being already in that malefic headspace can be really helpful to not get so disillusioned or disappointed.
Yeah, and I
That
think
part.
there's so much to say about like how Jupiter can very much represent too much of a good thing. I was actually like literally just making a TikTok about this earlier. But I think people idolize the benefics and like are so horrible and mean to the malefics, and there's just so much polarity and there's so much black and white, and I see that all over TikTok and stuff too, where people are like, Jupiter's moving into Cancer, that's the best thing that could ever happen. And it's like, yes, and like there's always this other side to things happening too. Like, yes, having a well-placed Jupiter or having a lot of Jupiter energy can be a little too idealistic. It can have a hard time coming back down to reality. Like, there are pros and cons to both. And I think a big pro of having a lot of malefic energy, of course, the con can be just getting like so washed up in the woe is me, everything is hard,
Hmm.
everything sucks. But there's also this like, yeah, it's been hard, but I know I can handle it.
Hmm.
And there's kind of this like confidence and energy of like, I'm going to be okay no matter what happens because I know how to take care of myself because I've been through this. That comes from having a lot of malefic that I feel like benefic ruled or predominant, I guess, people like don't necessarily have. Um, but they can also like get really tripped up super easily or have too much good, and
Hmm.
there's so much nuance in just like the extremes, like where are you on the spectrum kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, should we like dig into a little like malefic-ruled luminaries? Like, how is that
Yes.
different than like having your Mars in its own sign or in detriment? Like, like to me, the luminaries, like they're the points of life. Like that's why the sun, moon, rising, and that's why they're so important is because like what your Mars is doing in your chart may like for me Mars is in charge of money and relationships like second and seventh houses and it comes through my third house, right? But like my sun, my moon, and ascendant, those are me. Those are like my whole essence, right? And so then my Scorpio
Hmm.
sun has that inherent, like very strategic, very like consistent, very like deep and intense energy that can make me a really hard worker, can make me withstand a lot of hard stuff. But I've had to go through a number of experiences that have been not like they don't feel good, right? To like get that sort of like it's like strength training, right? That's so Mars
Right.
Saturn of like doesn't I mean it can feel good to like really work your muscles, but it's exhausting and it's like a certain type of like type 2 fun feel good.
Hmm.
But then you get stronger over time and you're able to like withstand more, right? And that just shines into your entire life when your luminaries are ruled by malefics.
Yeah, I'm also realizing too, we all have our sect like conjunct a malefic.
Mm, that's cute.
That is cute.
The one thing
So,
that could be
yeah.
interesting to talk about is having the moon in a malefic, because that can speak so strongly
Hmm.
to your childhood, your home life, your parents. And also to something
Hmm.
that I've found is that if the moon can't see its ruler, so if you have a malefic moon and it can't see either Saturn or Mars, that can also bring up its own challenges because it's already in a malefic ruled sign. It can't see its lord. So then it's like, I'm in this challenging predicament and I might not have the resources to survive
Yeah.
or withstand this long
Mm,
term. Add in if you're a minority
hmm
or in an environment that you don't appreciate, then it can affect you long term and how you connect with others in that emotional space, especially if you are a night chart and the moon is your greater luminary. And that might be a bigger conversation. But I think it's important when people identify their home lives because I'm in that situation. Like my moon is in Aries, my Mars in
Hmm.
Scorpio, so they don't see each other by traditional
hmm
aspect. And so for me, having that moon in the fourth in Aries, not able to see
Hmm.
Mars in Scorpio, it's like I always had this strong survival instinct. And I can tell when my family was lying to me from a very, very young age. And so people are like, you're so intuitive, like that Mars in Scorpio, like blood in the water, can tell when something is off. And I'm like, that was grown out of survival, not necessarily in the most nurturing way. But now in my work, Mars is also in strong aspect to my MC. It helps immensely because people always like, what does your intuition say? I'm like, so that was built out of survival. So it got stronger, Mars, by a very challenging home life, moon in Aries in the fourth.
hmm
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely malefic-ruled luminaries can speak to very difficult life experiences that influence your
Hmm.
entire personality and your entire
Yes.
psyche. And the moon in particular is just, Jason Hawley always talks about how the moon is covered in craters and she's very impacted and impactable. Jason's a Cancer rising, and I feel like one of his big teachings is to allow yourself to be impacted by the world. But the moon is, when you have Mars and Saturn, like those impacts are harsh, right? Those can take like big chunks out of you or put like long lasting wounds, like chironic, unhealable wounds. And especially the moon speaking, when we're kids, we don't have control and agency and autonomy over our lives like we do as adults. And so then when Saturn and Mars are either like neglecting and or maltreating your moon, it does leave these lasting impacts. But then like how beautiful to be impacted by the world and to like take our own shapes. I think there's a song by Molly Tuttle called Crooked Tree where she sings
Mm.
about how like the mills came and cut down all the straight trees and made them into toothpicks and $20 bills, and then the crooked trees were all that were left, but like how beautiful to be a crooked tree that doesn't fit into the sawmill, so then you get to grow and drink rainwater and enjoy the sunlight. um, I feel like that's like that impact of the moon of like how beautiful to be like exactly who you are, even if it really hurt to become who that is.
Yeah.
And Kelly Surtees talked about this, just to go back to that point. Like sometimes you're not going to get everything in this one timeline. You're not going to have the best marriage, the best financial opportunities, like your dream career, all at the same time or at all. Like, and some people don't even want to have the children or all the money. They're just very content in their solitude or like being of service, whatever that is. So sometimes, as a relief
Mm.
for the individual looking at their chart, maybe looking at their malefic ruled moon specifically, like, oh, maybe having a very nurturing, loving family wasn't in the cards in this timeline. I was meant to break generational curses. I was meant to withstand. I was meant to rebel against a family unit that wasn't aligned. But that doesn't mean I don't get family. It means I get to create my own. But sometimes
hmm
when, at least this was my thought, I'm like, why can't I like fix this or why can't I make it better? I'm like, it's not my responsibility to make it better. It's actually my responsibility to create boundaries and to leave and to break these generational curses from continuing through me. So I think that's also, we're talking about malefic moons in this segment. That's also can be very comforting to be like, oh, wait, I'm not meant to kind of fit in as a malefic moon, depending on how it shows up in the chart. I'm also meant to gain power or to exert boundaries to form new opportunity or new expression of self to fulfill that kind of crooked tree analogy you were talking about, Alicia.
hmm
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think about that a lot too with being like a detriment sun in the eighth um with Saturn there. Um because I've definitely, actually, somebody pointed out recently, I think this is so funny, but my whole childhood, I would introduce myself and people would say, "Oh, Lori, that's my mom's name," or "That's my aunt's name." And my friend was like, "How funny is it that like even your first impression with people is comparing you to their mom or comparing you to someone else, or it's like no longer about you, it's about someone they know with your name." And I was like, "Oh my God, yeah, detriment son. Like, why does that happen to me so often?" And my moon on my MC, like their mom is the first thing they see, I guess. Um, so random, but that's been one of those things where it was like such a minor comment, but it really stuck with me because, like, yeah, why do I sometimes have a hard time, like, being just me? There's always something that I feel like people project onto me, or, and it's not just me, it's every Aquarius I've ever talked to, it's every malefic person I've ever talked to. Um, but it's funny how even just like your first impression sometimes can just be something that's turned away from you so quickly. It's like, oh, that's okay.
Mm.
That's my name too, you know? It's very Aquarius.
Mhm.
That's a good like Aquarius book. That's my name too. Something along
I
those lines.
know, right? Like, yeah, so funny.
Yeah,
The memoir.
absolutely. And I feel like we've been talking about sect a lot through this, and this
Hmm.
just feels like a good place to really punctuate that. And Laurie and I
Yeah,
did a whole episode about sect and sect theory, so go look that up if you want to familiarize yourself more with the technique. But it is like such a simple, deeply potent way of making sense of the traditional
yeah,
planets and like whether your sun or your moon is more like completely influential over your chart, depending on a day chart or night chart. And then, like, I have found as I'm on the tail end of my Saturn return in a night chart that Saturn was very harsh for me. And as I've been doing
mm,
readings for people with Saturn and Aries beginning their Saturn returns, the people with the day charts, like, obviously, still watch out. We should all be watching out for Saturn and Aries. Like, everyone go buy a couple air filters, like, right now before, like, the horrible wildfire season starts and all the air
yeah,
filters sell out. But like if you have a day chart Saturn, a lot of times things can end up being more constructive at the end or beneficial. And again, it's probably not going to feel good. I don't think very many people are like, wow, my Saturn return was deeply pleasurable. But like you might have fewer extreme consequences from your Saturn return and a lot more like very productive products that come out of it.
yeah.
Yeah, like you guys are both date charts with strong Saturns. How do you feel about that?
I was actually gonna say mine actually was kind of pleasurable. Like
Okay.
it was just like the first time in my life that I felt like I actually just had some clarity and kind of knew what I wanted. Because before that, I mean, I felt like personally my 20s were rough. Like I had a lot of pressure put on me. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Why can't you just have a day job or keep a day job or be in the 9 to 5? Or why can't you just be this like specific certain thing? And it felt like it was just coming from every direction. And then when I turned 28, that was about when Saturn hit my sun, because it would have hit my sun and then Mercury and then my Saturn, like dominoes. And I just remember waking up and just like not caring anymore. And just finally having this moment of like, it was my 28th birthday that I woke up and angry quit my job and was like, I'm an astrologer now. Like, I just don't care anymore. And everything has just gotten better and better and better since that moment of just not caring. And there's been many moments where like I felt like my body was shutting down, so I stayed in. But because I did that, I got a ton of work done. And that work
Mhm.
specifically got me X, Y, and Z. Or
Yes,
like
yeah.
that's happened to me a million times. Or my actual Saturn return, I've told this story a million times, was when I got called to jury duty and had to cancel a trip. But I spent 2 weeks in my room making my business cards and like creating my website. And I just poured so much of myself into my work. in those 2 weeks. And, I could have been, woe is me, I had to cancel a trip, like whatever, but it made me get work done. It made me create this space. And I think for me, like that's what Saturn specifically has really shown up as in my life. It's really just like a sit down and do the work and then it's fine. Then go play, right? Like when the work is done, you can go play. It's fine.
Hmm.
But until the work is done, and if I don't do the work, I get punished. So it's
Yeah.
more so like I need to just listen to it
Yeah,
and then
Saturn's
it's
like
usually all
that
right.
teacher that like you have to do the homework and you have to do it
Right.
correctly and well, and you're like, ugh. And then by the time you're done with that class, you're like, wow, I actually really understand geometry now, and like now I'm actually
Right.
a better astrologer.
Right. You're like, I
Um,
hated you, but you're actually a really good teacher.
yeah, like okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
what do you think about Saturn return for strong Saturn, Matthew?
Here's the
Mhm.
thing. We haven't talked about this a lot. I mean, a little bit, but so much of this is going to be in relation to all the other planets and angles and
Hmm.
even asteroids in your chart, right? So I have Venus in Libra in the 10th. So I have Saturn in Aquarius. So when I was going through my Saturn return, I also had a trine from my natal Venus. So that's a completely different story. Let's say if you're a night chart, Saturn and Aries making a square to Mars in Cancer, right? Like there'd be so many things that fall into this. But of course, as you mentioned, Alicia, going through a Saturn return in a day chart, going to be easier than a night chart. We know that according to sect. And then, of course, if you're looking at your specific chart to see where that falls, because I've heard the wide gambit of people that have a day chart, their Saturn return was still really challenging because of where it was in the chart and not being supported by a benefic, right? So that's a whole other conversation. But I
Hmm.
did feel during my Saturn return, it allowed me to really know my worth. I have Saturn in Aquarius in my second. It allowed me to make a lot more money than I ever had before, and also taught me how to use my time with greater discipline in a way that allowed me to see I'm like I have so much work I want to get done or need to get done in a certain amount of time, and then I'm like I can't do this, quote unquote, and then I did it. I'm like, oh, so the only thing that was holding me back was my mind. Like very Aquarius, like
Hmm.
let's tweak the mindset to be of greater service to yourself and others.
Yeah, that's beautifully
Yes.
said.
Yeah, and
Um,
I have a trine to Jupiter in Libra.
There it
well,
is.
and
So
mine
same.
has a trine to Venus in Scorpio as well,
Mm,
and Venus is in
That's true.
Saturn's terms. But still, night chart, Venus does not have a
of
ton of
course.
dignity.
Exactly, I was
And
gonna
there's
say.
help. I mean, I will say, like, being slowed down by my ACL injury led me to get into a very serious long-term, like,
Yeah.
Mm,
supportive relationship, fifth
yes.
house Aquarius. And yeah, it kind of accelerated, like, okay, wow, we can really take care of each other. And, like, well,
Right.
I want to talk about Mars and day charts
Wait, can
before we
we
move
pause for
on.
1 second? It's like by slowing down, you got more support in a loving, committed
Yes.
relationship. So I want everyone to hear that when you are
Right.
plagued by a Saturn event. Like I give the example of if you go on vacation, there's this beautiful cherry tree, a mile walk outside of your accommodation. But if you are not fit to make that mile journey to this beautiful cherry tree and you don't have a basket being Saturn, the strength being Mars, great. So you're on vacation, there's this beautiful cherry tree or this waterfall, but you didn't honor Mars and Saturn when they were knocking at your door. So you can't really fully enjoy the Venus and Jupiter when it comes knocking on your door either. So I think people like we live in a
Yeah.
world where it's all Venus, all Jupiter, especially in North America and other parts of the world. But it's like, okay, well, if you're not going to come to the challenge and the altar of Mars and Saturn, good luck enjoying those things to the greatest extent when the Venus and Jupiter come around.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so like malefic fifth and seventh house too. Like going back to that, to have to go through something ridiculous to then be given a partner that's worth it.
Yeah.
Um, there's
And
always gonna be that if you're a Cancer and Libra rising.
yes, especially if your IC is also in the fifth, like me.
Yay.
And having an Aries descendant, yesterday my friend was like reflecting my relationship with my partner back at me, and she said, my friend said that it seems like me and my partner are really good at coming together to address conflicts, and then that, or like to address pressures and difficult, like when I had my surgery.
Aries.
Yeah. And so it's like us coming together and getting closer because of the difficult, effortful experience, which is just so what we're talking about in this episode. So, um,
Yes.
but before we go on like 10,000 exciting tangents, Mars in a day chart versus a night chart. I have felt so I have Mars in Sag in the third in a night chart. And like I'm always getting in minor car accidents. Like my car has had so much body work done on it. It is hilariously ridiculous, but it always like works out. Like I've never gotten injured. Like Jupiter comes in and helps, and it's like a night chart, so it like kind of cools it down. And then I
Mhm.
feel like this most recent Mars retrograde period for me was just it was in my 10th and 11th houses and went over like stationed on my MC in Leo, and it was just an extended time of exerting effort towards my career, and like it didn't
Yeah.
all feel good. Some of it was like, okay, we have to redo or reconsider, like our energy is waning now as Mars is like retrograding through Cancer, but it was very productive, and kind of actually back to the like feeling good through like just exerting effort, that Lori was talking about. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's like where someone with a day chart Mars, which I'm sure you guys can both kind
Mhm.
of get into, but it's like a Mars retrograde experience might just be a bit spicier or more combustible, or not
Yeah.
quite as productive because the heat of the day exacerbates the heat of Mars. So,
Yeah, I actually have a really funny story from like a week or two ago with that, but it's so minor, it's so stupid, but it's like really made me think about it. We had a cabin in Olympic after Norwalk, and I went to pull a pizza out of the oven because we made dinner. And as I was pulling it out of the oven, there was like a big pile of trash that was sitting right next to me. And because there was like a trash bin there, I couldn't open the door all the way. And so I had this thought for a quick second. I was like, I could push this away and then open the door all the way, or I could just balance it on my leg and reach my hand in. And then I was like, I'm gonna burn my hand on the edge of the thing if I do this. And then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna burn my hand. And then I just did it. I just reached my hand in to grab the pizza out and touched the back of my hand to the edge of the thing. And I was like, yeah, like I knew that was coming, but like Mars on the Ascendant in Cancer, like I burn myself all the time and it's always minor. It's never anything like, well, knock on wood. It's never been anything too bad. But I do these things all the time. And about 2 hours later, I was like, what a Mars Saturn conversation I just had with myself. Like, I could take an extra second to move that away, but I'm not going to. And because of that, I burned my hand and then had to move it away and still had to go through all of that to get it out. And so I just thought it was such a funny metaphor. But then I was like, where was Mars in the chart? Because I have Saturn at 19 Aquarius, and I looked it up for about 2 hours before that to the like estimated time, and it was an exact opposition to my Saturn by the minute. And it was one of those things I was just like, yep, like this is my Mars Saturn conversation I have in my head all the
mhm.
time. Like I could be impulsive and Aries moon, just try to take the pizza out of the oven with my hand right now. Or I could move the trash bin and open it all the way and make it easier on myself. And I was like, this is such a metaphor for my life in general.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, and that also gets into what Matthew was saying about like aspects and who else is involved, and like the Mars
Exactly.
transiting Mars and Leo opposing your Saturn is going to be more
Right.
intense energy than like your moon in Aries that sextiles your Saturn.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Matthew, do you have any examples of like combustible day chart Marses you want to talk about?
I do. I have two. So there's a good one and a challenging one. Which one do you want me to start with?
It's a challenging one.
Challenging.
So I have Mars in a
Malefic.
day chart. Yeah. Mars in a day chart in the 11th, right? So like with friends, I'm very loyal. Like that's just who I am
Mm.
as a person. Like I'm very loving. When I was younger, people like, you're so intense, you're too much. I'm like, because I know how to express emotions and I keep you accountable if you lie to me. Like it's always something that confused me and like a lot of people that just don't know how to express emotion or show up or be consistent, which is also a very malefic energy. If you want someone to pick you up at the airport, who's going to keep their word, who's going to do the work, who's going to like go through hell and high water, it's going to be a malefic dominant person. that's another
Hmm.
conversation. I've also had friends be like, you're really intimidating. I feel like you're going to judge me. Like, I'm jealous of you. And that doesn't feel good, like with your
Hmm.
friends kind of attacking you in that way. So I've had to find friends where it's an iron sharpens iron type situation where they're
Hmm.
also very successful. They're also wanting to evolve because, like, my Mars in Scorpio is also very close to my sun. I'm like, I'm always doing the work mentally, physically, spiritually. Not everyone is up to that task because it's not an easy road to
Hmm.
consistently hold yourself accountable and to do that work. But for me, it's essential. So if my friends aren't doing it, there's only so far we can go together. And then when I have those conversations, I usually end up getting attacked or judged myself. They're like, you're expecting too much. Like, I feel like I can never say or do the right thing. I'm like, I'm just having a conversation. And for me, that's happened a lot in my life. But then when I find really strong friends, it's like an instant connection that can be really potent and very
Hmm.
powerful. So it's quality over quantity for sure, but it has been a Martian ride where there's been a lot of hurt and a lot of kind of cutting of certain friends off in my life where I was like, I thought we were going to be ride or die. But then at a certain point, just kind of like when I release one friend, that friend energy is going to come back through a different person that's more aligned for me. So I've had to learn that, which was hard when I was younger, got easier as I got older.
Mm. That makes a
Yeah,
lot of
I
sense.
I want to add to that too. I attract a lot of Mars in the first people or Mars dominant people in general. Um, and that's a conversation I've had a million times is like the idea of being too much.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like having Mars in the first or being an Aries moon or having prominent like Mars energy, especially on the Aries side, or especially if Mars is conjunct your luminaries or angles or whatever, I do feel like there's so much like being told that you're being too much. That is just like such a theme that comes up a lot.
For
And
sure.
it's like a questioning, like, am I being too much or are you just like not my
Or are
person?
you not enough? Or are you actually just like a peasant on the side
Exactly.
not doing anything? Like,
Exactly.
and not to judge people, but it's like, oh, then I just wasn't around the right environment to
Hmm.
support this Martian energy to go and do it. Because when people are like, I want to do this, I'm like, hey, let's book this. Let's go and like be accountable. Then they just
Right.
go, they flake, or they make an excuse because they're undisciplined. I'm like, well, then you don't actually mean what you say. You're not willing to go
Right.
forward or to get stronger alongside me.
Hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely. And that's like
Mhm.
so much of, astrology being a tool to really like know ourselves and confirm our intuitions. And then when
Mhm.
you get this like descriptions of like, the zodiac signs being the psychological environments and then the planets being the parts of yourself or you're a part of the cosmos, or maybe it's a bit of both, and we're playing it out. So if you have planets in Scorpio, like you're in that intense scorpionic environment. And if you're
Mhm.
trying to live in like a very Libra, Pisces, benefic way, when your chart is actually very like malefic dominant, you're gonna have a bad time, right? And so having astrology and really using or any tool for self-knowledge, which astrology is an amazing tool for, and then giving yourself what you actually need is like how you work with the malefic energy. Like if you're always trying to just be Venus about it when your life purpose and your, natal promise is to have a malefic dominant experience, you're
Yeah.
gonna be a lot less happy than if you actually just embrace the
Right.
intensity of the malefic experience.
And like you just have to accept too that like you need to be intense. You need to be like you need other people that are really intense too. Because there's nothing harder than like really trying to make relationships work with anybody who are just not willing to put in that work or they're not willing to like meet you where you are, and it always ends up feeling so like lonely and sad, and it's
Hmm.
like why am I not getting what other people get or whatever, and then you step back and realize like oh, because they're settling for something I wouldn't want or
Hmm.
something that wouldn't be good for me. And so I think that's a big thing that shows up with malefic people as well is just like, especially Saturn, because Saturn is Chronos, Saturn is time, Saturn is having to wait and having to make the mistakes over and over and over. And so I think there's something to be said about like longevity, but also it's going to happen when you're older and having to accept
Hmm.
that like you're going to have to trial and error this a bit and it's not going to be as easy as it is for other people, but it might be more worth it than other people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let it age like a fine wine.
exactly.
Um, okay, so malefic ruled angles. I feel like the ascendant is obviously like the most important angle. And I have been getting a lot of clients recently who have their ascendants ruled by their out of sect malefic in particular, which is a
Mm.
really interesting, thing to dig into as far as like your out of sect malefic is going to represent some of the most difficult, effortful sorts of energies that you have to deal with in your life. And so when your ascendant is ruled by that planet, it can mean that your life might just be kind of repeatedly drawn towards encountering these more difficult components of life of the nature of like, if it's Mars, it might be more conflict. Saturn might be more like long-term effortful endeavors. What sign is your Mars or Saturn in, and what does that say as well? But being repeatedly drawn to these difficult experiences and then being someone who's able, like Matthew was really pointing out at the beginning, like the strength of being able to withstand adversity and difficulty and then being able
Hmm.
to like be that resource to other people going through that. um,
Yes.
which does not always feel good, but is so necessary, especially in this world that is
Hmm.
changing so drastically, where we really need to be fighting for like life to continue and for like our species to continue in a few hundred years. Like we need that malefic energy for that.
Hmm.
It can also feel like you're your own worst enemy, or you're kind of like getting in your way, or you're like very hard on yourself. But just understanding the like archetypal symbolic energy of what it means to have your out of sect malefic ruling your ascendant can give you a lot of permission. And like, if you have a Mars ascendant ruler, like making sure you're getting enough exercise and movement, whereas a Saturn ascendant ruler, making sure that you're like doing quiet meditation and solitude, donating money or time or resources to nonprofits or organizations or mutual aid groups that are representative of these archetypal energies. There's ways you can also remediate it and give it a channel so that it's hopefully not just like wreaking havoc in your life. But yeah, what do you guys think about malefic ruled ascendants?
I'm a
Yeah. I mean,
fan. I love it.
As
yeah.
one. But you have your
Yeah.
Yes.
insect malefic ruling your ascendant,
That's
right?
true. But just to like a malefic dominant person, I really like what you spoke to Alicia is like they could also be the resource for other people. Not
Mm.
because, and they might, if it's the out of sec malefic, have to go through hard times, but I rewatch, it's one of my favorite movies, Venus and Libra, but Aaron Brockovich of like this
Mm-hmm.
real story of
Yeah.
how a woman with very few resources who didn't fit the archetype of like this cerebral lawyer went to fight. And like Aaron Brockovich in real life is a Cancer sun of like wanting to protect people and this drawn out process over years, having to sacrifice so much and not knowing if they were going to win, to getting one of the biggest settlements of the time to help the people of Hinkley, California be some kind of compensation for being poisoned, right? So there is that energy of no, it's not pleasant and you're sacrificing a lot. But on the other side of your soul, if we're talking about reincarnations, like you're going to be such a fierce sentinel of justice or of protection or of financial resources for those who need your souls. Like, yes, I want that experience. A lot of times, those are our favorite movies, is when the main character is taking down these big, unaligned, let's say, evil conglomerates to bring peace and justice to the world. So,
Yeah.
yes, it sucks when you're in it, but if you're watching yourself as an avatar in this timeline, you're like, yeah, keep going, like fight the rebellion. So, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, we're in that time with Pluto and Aquarius. Uranus about to go into Gemini, so it can speak to like if you feel like you have a greater purpose that maybe hasn't materialized and you're a Saturn ruled ascendant. It's like what might not even happen until even after Saturn return. And Kelly Surtees said this too in Vedic. Saturn doesn't really fully mature until 35, 36. So if you're a
Mm-hmm.
Saturn
Right.
ruled ascendant, you might not even really come into your being until 36 years old.
Because that's the Saturn square after your Saturn
Yeah.
return. And
I
also Saturn's minor years of 30, so looking at when you
mhm.
turn 30 as an event of something culminating around Saturn.
Yes, and I think about that all the time too, because I feel like so many people get through their Saturn return and then get whacked in the face when they turn 36 because they have
Mm,
that first Saturn square and they're like, I thought I was done. And you're like, no, now it repeats. Like now we're going
Yeah.
backwards and you're gonna get hit by all of the old traumas from when you were 7 that you never dealt with. But yeah, there's just such a like repetitive nature to that. And it's like, well, do you want to fix it and solve it and work through it, or do you want to continue on the way you are?
Hmm. Yes. Okay, let's talk about the MC and IC real quick and then maybe wrap
Hmm.
up if that sounds
Yeah.
good to folks. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about the Malefic-Ruled MC, Matthew?
Well, for me, with it being in that fun Scorpio soup of my Pluto, Mars, Sun, MC, all in Scorpio, for me, it's like the tenacity of never giving up. Like, I've had so many people like, oh, I thought you're going to give up, you're not going to do it. I'm like, if you're going to tell me I can't do this, it's going to make me motivate even more to like
Yeah.
dig my
Hmm.
heels in and achieve it. And
Right.
for me, when I work with clients, like that Mars and Scorpio injection to go deep and to heal these wounds, like, I've dealt with so much in terms of pain and resilience. So then when I see clients suffering, I'm sure both of you can attest to this, like your own personal pains and traumas, it's like you just subconsciously attract them to help heal them as well with that
Yeah.
malefic energy. So whatever you faced or have dealt with a lot based on the aspects in your chart, it's like, okay, great. If I've dealt with that trauma, I spent the time, Saturn, dealing with all of this so that I can help you quickly, Mars, move through it so that you don't have to go what I went through. So I feel like there is so much of let me help heal this deep pain and trauma, especially with the sun ruling my eighth and Mars being so close to the sun. And
Hmm.
then also my MC, there's just like that huge eighth house influence with my career and
Yeah.
a Mars ruled MC and how I can really go deep. And even like my acting roles, there's a lot of like Mars and Scorpio themes. Like what I audition for is often very Martian. So I'm like, yeah, it just kind of like repeats itself over and over and over again.
And I feel like that's
That,
also so water sign MC, right? Because any
yeah.
of the four
True.
malefic ruled signs would, they're each their own element. So that's also an interesting thing. But then, yeah, if you have a Scorpio MC, like really going into that healing space would be such a beautiful way to work with that water energy.
Yeah, and I think it was Chris Brennan was talking about how a lot of actors end up playing roles anyway that like align with their chart, or they end up like
Mm-hmm.
acting something out in their chart in a play or a yeah, like, and it's that's funny, something to think about too. But
It is funny. Like we're drawn to these energies.
exactly, like we just
Yeah.
relive these archetypes in so many different ways that are
And
so
like
literal.
and like timelines and universes, right? Like it's like these
Yeah.
things just play out in like art imitating life. Even like when Lady Gaga won a Grammy in A Star Is Born, and then she had winning like a Grammy in real life. It's like all these things. If you think of
Mm-hmm.
like acting, it's
Yeah.
like or playing video games. It's the most meta thing. It's like an avatar watching an avatar playing another avatar, which it makes astrology for me that much more mind blowing because it really is like no matter what timeline or universe you are watching or being a part of, your chart still shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's like the power of archetypes, right? Is that
Yeah.
there's so many ways the archetype, like someone with a Scorpio, like there's a ton of different ways to have a Scorpio MC, right? And then there's still the same archetypal connection to Scorpio, but yeah, there's so much like gradient and nuance in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Well,
then I have an Aquarius IC, and it's ruled by my out of sect. Well, I guess, and yeah, Matthew, yours is your out of sect malefic as well for your MC. And my IC is ruled by my out of sect Saturn. And one thing that Kelly Surtees has taught as far as planets in detriment and also malefic influences is that one of the ways it can show up is inconsistencies. And I've definitely noticed
hmm.
that with like an out of, especially Saturn in Pisces is just like floating around. And I've moved almost every year since I graduated from high school and turned 18. Like my IC, I also had a, I have Moon conjunct Saturn as well. My childhood was very traumatic. The IC can definitely speak to your childhood and your early years. But also, as I've come into my Saturn return, and this really started when Saturn was in Aquarius, like resourcing my IC a few
Hmm.
years ago, is I have developed such a deep and devotional ancestral veneration practice, which is also all my Scorpio planets. And I have Ceres and Mercury and Adonis all conjunct the ascendant, and my ascendant rulers conjunct Pluto. So there's like, and Lori and I did a whole episode about asteroid underworld stories
Yeah.
as well. But the way I go into the underworld and like the power that now, as my Saturn returns completing, like there's so much resourcing that comes from working with my ancestors. And I feel like that's kind of an unconventional, like I'm just like a white American. I don't know a lot of white Americans who are really working with our ancestors. I think most of us like to pretend like our ancestors don't exist because they've done some pretty horrible things. But I also have a ton of ancestors from, before the past 300 years. And even the ancestors, I love to think about like the women, like pioneers who just like were forced to kind of go along with their husbands, but were probably like very strong, fierce, like those are my blood also. And so, yeah, it's like my IC has given me, and which is also my Saturn squares my Jupiter. So I feel like I get gifts from my Saturn as well. But that can definitely be a strong IC experience is interacting with your ancestors. So I encourage everyone to explore that more as well.
Yeah.
Cool. And then I had mentioned the descendant and that being just like an effortful, like partners coming together about effort. Do you have anything to add to that, Lori, with your Saturn ruled descendant?
Mine has always ended up manifesting as like long distance or
Like they're
being,
away.
yeah, literally far away. And Venus in the ninth too. But yeah, like people who were moving, people who were unavailable, people who were far away. Um, that kind of stuff happens to me a lot. I notice it with friendships too, though. Most of my friends are in
Yeah,
different
like
time
us.
zones, like you guys. Um, yeah, because Venus in my ninth also rules my 11th. Um, but I do notice that I make most of my friends from niche things while I'm traveling or my niche hobbies. And then I end up having friends everywhere except for home. Um, and the ruler of my IC is conjunct Saturn. So, that is something that like I've noticed as a huge pattern for me is like when I want to see a friend or talk to somebody, I have to either call them or take a plane.
Mhm. Yeah, Saturn can definitely bring solitude, rejoicing in the 12th.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if anyone has any stories or questions or reflections on their own malefic ruled placements or the way that the malefics kind of infuse into their lives, like please comment or reach out to us on Instagram.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Also,
and
I feel
then
like we could
there's,
definitely have like a part two to this easily.
oh, we could, yeah, this is
We could talk
such
about
a
this for
rich,
hours.
I really want to dig more into the conversations the planets are having between each other and like what it
Yeah.
means to have like
Yeah.
supportive or difficult aspects
Or
with
even like
planets.
questions that people submit to then answer those
Mm-hmm.
as well, right?
Yeah. So yeah,
Absolutely.
please let us know what you're thinking with all of this. And then yeah, there's all the ways to like connect with Matthew down below. He's an amazing astrologer, has a great podcast. And yeah, what do you have going on, Matthew? Do you want to share anything that's how people can engage
Yeah,
with
the
you?
biggest thing I started during the Scorpio new moon of 2024 is called the Alchemy Point, of course. And it's an online membership community where there's a ton of resources with astrology, with self-development, with community aspects. So if you're looking to learn more about astrology in real time, I release week ahead breakdowns that explain the astrology of every single day. There's monthly challenges for self-improvement. There's live events of being able to get support one-on-one with me, whether it's through astrology, tarot, or coaching. So there's lots of magic to behold. So I'm sure that'll be in the show notes, or if they go to my website, they'll see the alchemy point there as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And what about you, Lori? What do you have going on right now?
Oh, so much. I've been deep in writing and editing mode again. Finally recovered the book from my 400 plus pages of bullet points and have been formatting it. Um, but it's coming along and I started a Substack finally, which I've launched.
Yay.
Yay. And so I'm going to be posting stories on there. So I have have kind of restructured how I want the book to be. That's been big in the thought process for the past couple months. And I'm super excited that with the Substack, I've created two tiers. There's a paid and an unpaid. The unpaid, I'm going to be sharing a ton of stories, personal stories, other people's stories, but just showing how rich and nuanced these asteroids can be and how they can show up so similarly and differently to other people. Um, and then the paid version is going to be more of like interpretive art. So, like, here's the myth, here's a little bit more about them, here's how to interpret it if you have them prominent in your chart. And then I've been doing little posts of like journal prompts and like different ways that you can work with those deities if you have them as well.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's been
That's
good.
awesome.
Yeah, what about you?
I am hosting a Phases of the Moon retreat outside of Roseburg, Oregon on July 19th of 2025. So if you're listening to this before that event, go to my website and learn more. And it would be awesome to see some of you there. It'll be on the Umpqua River, and we're gonna like dig really deep into the natal, like the moon phase you were born under, and like what that says about your personality and physical needs and emotional needs and all the lunar things. And we'll really dig into how to work with the shifting moon phases in the sky. And we'll be blending teas and doing ecstatic dance and yoga. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I feel like that's the big thing going on. And then just always offering readings as well if anyone
Yeah.
wants to reach out. I think we all offer readings, right?
Yeah, all three of us
Yeah.
do.
So if anyone wants an astrology reading, you have lots of choices. But yeah, thank you again for joining us, Matthew. We'll be doing a few more episodes with Matthew as well. So keep tuning in, everyone, to get his lovely energy. So yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any personal stories to share or thoughts and reflections about what we discussed in this episode, please comment down below or reach out to us on Instagram. And please come follow us on Instagram at ConversationsWPlanets, where we share forecasts and updates about the astrological movements happening in the sky, as well as updates about our episodes. The link to our Instagram is in the show notes down below.